Right when Canada needs more investment, millionaires are fleeing Canada. And that's as we're getting constant announcements that we're only getting more and more government jobs. So as private money leaves, public money prints. This is going to continue to get way worse. We're going to get into all of this data today because we see politicians continuing to hold up the nation building projects that we need to show the world we're ready to do business in Canada again. There's a lot to go over, but make sure you stick around for the second half of this video because I have to call out a creator who I think a lot of you watching are going to know. He made some bad statements today that I think need to be called out. So let's get into it. Starting off, I actually think we have a generally encouraging story about some private capital coming to Canada, so we will get into the details here.
Chinese businesswoman Ruby Liu is one step closer to buying parts of Hudson's Bay. A judge has approved her plan to take over 3 stores' leases, but there's still a roadblock. Out of 25 locations she wants, at least 23 landlords say no. Liu says she's not too worried. She believes the landlord just don't fully understand her plans yet, and she's confident they'll change their minds.
The landlord's attitude today might not be the same tomorrow, and their attitude after the court's decision is very different from before the ruling.
So if you guys don't know, she came in and made the announcement. Obviously, Hudson's Bay made their bankruptcy claims, and they've kind of been getting sold for parts. Different people have owned the names, different people have owned the IP, but she's trying to take over these stores, take over these locations, and we're going to get into what she wants because even though, you know, we don't know where the money's coming from, whatever, this is still a foreign entrepreneur who is bringing money into Canada. And of course, I would have preferred it was a Canadian entrepreneur, making sure it's Canadian jobs, but just knowing that this is private investment, well, private, I don't know where everybody's coming from. As at the very least, it's not being printed by the Canadian government. That's a positive step in my opinion.
Ruby Liu originally accumulated her wealth living in Harbin, China. Then she moved to Shenzhen, starting restaurant, real estate, and malls. She's been in Canada for 14 years and now runs 3 malls in Vancouver. She wants to do what she did in Vancouver in other provinces too.
Well, there you go. I mean, if she's been in Canada for 14 years, she owns the mall. She's just slowly grinding in the background.
The retail industry is fiercely competitive from country.
She is doing her interview in Chinese, so.
Country to country, city to city. What we need now are new entrepreneurs.
Liu says she's ready to shake things up in the North American retail market by giving Canadian department stores a makeover. Liu says she will keep traditional sales models but while hoping to appeal to a new, younger generation of shoppers. Central Walk CEO Linda says expanding the appeal of in-person shopping is key.
We will have the tradition combined with innovation and new ideas tailored to all age groups, not only 50 plus.
While Liu has acquired leases to some stores, she did not buy the Hudson Bay's logo, branding, or intellectual property.
Yeah, so something that is interesting, and I did another video on this previously, and this goes just like beyond the economics and, you know, the financial impact of what this store is going to do. We've actually seen the younger generation, Gen Z, they're kind of looking for that third place of where they want to hang out. And the malls have gotten popular again with kind of being, hey, it's not work and it's not home. Where can we meet up? Ironically, you would think with everything moving online that it would be that the malls would be suffering, but we are seeing, it's been slow, but an increase in the Gen Z being interested in going to stores again. So what a lot of these stores and malls are trying to do is create more experiences for people to hang out. So I actually oddly am somewhat happy to hear about this, happy that they want to build more stores, build more of an experience, cater to all the ages, because if done correctly, this is a private investment, again, in theory, not government money. We also need more millionaires to be encouraged to come into Canada because look at this article here. Canada's inflow of millionaires falls 70%, no longer in the safe 8. as we continue to see financial changes and societal changes, all these things in Canada, we are going to see numbers like this. And this is a much bigger impact than you think. Canada's reputation as a stable destination for wealth is quickly fading. Not a first sentence of an article that I would want to read, but that is what's happening in Canada. These are the realities. And this is all going to be very important because we're going to be talking about some more China updates, but then the me calling out some of the information that's going on later, we need to start talking in realities, okay? The New World Wealth data shows the number of millionaires looking to migrate to a new country sharply increased by 2025. Despite the increase, Canada will see its net flow plunge, a sign its quality of life proposition is weakening. And that's where these are sort of the canaries in the coal mine. And we're going to get into some of these stats, which are showing how important this is going to be for Canada's economy and the financial situation, because previously Canada was in the top 3. And they talk about the actual importance of this wealth coming in, because migrating millionaires are a vital source of Forex revenue, as they tend to bring wealth with them when they move to a new country. For instance, a migrant bringing in 10 million USD is the equivalent to a country generating 10 million USD in export revenue. So this is direct money that Canada will be losing out on when we need more private investment than ever. And, you know, they said 70%. Turns out it's 69%. Nice. Canada has long been a top spot for net inflows, but now it's out of the safe 8. And the safe 8 are the top 8 countries considered safe havens in the world. I don't know about you guys. I would like to stay in the safe 8. I would like Canada to be a good zone where people feel comfortable moving to as a millionaire. And the interesting thing, we're not going to read the entire article, but they do say it's not just that less millionaires are interested in moving to Canada. This number actually includes the millionaires who are straight up fleeing Canada, because if they were already Canadian millionaires, it's like a net inflow number. And so as millionaires and Canadians leave, this number gets hurt, and we're going to continue to fall down the list. And why this is so important is because we see these are the trends that are developing. The annual change in apartment asking rents, okay? In most of the areas in Canada, asking rents have fallen. Now, is that generally good for affordability? Absolutely. However, is that sign of a weakening market and weakening economy? Also, yes. And why I personally think the inflation number was off. But here we have Ben Rabideau. He said, also note, rents added 0.3 percentage points to the headline CPI last month on a reported 4.5% annual increase. That ain't gonna last. So he's saying that 0.3%, and what I said in my video too, is potentially going to be switching to negative, which would be dragging down the overall inflation number, which is why I think the banks are acting too slowly. And we know the economy is not doing well, especially from a private investment standpoint. And that's why he has clips like this talking about immigration. Businesses in Canada specifically have not been investing in their productivity. We've been relying on cheap labor to try and make money. I'll let him talk about it here.
It's crazy to me that they're pushing for productivity, but yet every business, the moment that they sense any tightness in the labor market, wants to bring in a ton of international temporary workers.
Yeah.
How about the answer is you invest in
robots?
Yeah. Like, what are we talking about?
Hallelujah,
so,
of course.
Right? So, like, let's stop.
So a bit of background on these guys. This is a large economics podcast in Canada, maybe the top one. I mean, these guys, one guy's like a fund manager, the other guy's an analyst. One guy's a real estate agent or a mortgage broker, but he's a bit of an economics nerd. And then Ben Rabideau is like a statistician and analyst, runs through all of this data. And these guys are ahead of usually what the government needs to do because they're seeing the data early. And he's saying these companies, when they're asked to focus on productivity, their first thought is, how do we bring in cheap labor? And this, trust me, guys, this whole video comes together. Stick around to the end because it's very important that we don't rewrite history and we don't let the media gaslight us, because I'm going to show how this all comes together, okay?
Giving businesses an out to not become more productive. Like, so if the government's listening, rein that in and encourage investment to get that product.
It's a substitution effect. It's clear.
100%.
So how are they encouraged then? That?
You say, look, you don't, look, if you're a business and you're trying to figure out how to make more widgets with your dollars, you have two options. You can either complain to the government that you can't hire enough, people at minimum wage, and government says, okay, no problem, bring in a bunch of kids from wherever, right? Or the government says, tough luck, figure it out. And you got to put your thinking cap on and you find ways to become more productive, which is.
There's a bit of an audio thing going on there.
is what the U.S. has been doing for years.
Like invest in CapEx.
Correct. You figure it out, man. So whether that's, automation, like whatever that looks like, if you tell businesses, figure your shit out, they're pretty good at doing that if you don't give them the easy out of just hire a bunch of more cheap labor.
Okay, so as these guys whose job is to know this are talking about how these private companies in Canada are not investing in productivity, they're investing in private and cheap labor, so the large corporations and even medium-sized whatever win from this cheap labor. Don't worry, because who's going to run cover for them? The mainstream media. And look at this article. Canadians' average wages outpaced inflation, Stats Canada reports. Okay, CTV. We know that these guys are used as a mouthpiece of the government, and they're trying to be like, calm down, guys. We swear you're making more money. Inflation's not that bad. And I do think inflation will fall, but numbers, it will be disinflation. It's not that we're going to see deflation just yet, but it's really funny to have them go into this article in all these industries, and they're like, oh, look, you guys have outpaced the inflation growth. If you've only outpaced it for 1 year, but the inflation has outpaced it for the last 5 years, so we are still way behind when it comes to overall cost of living versus earnings. This is very, very important because we're going to cover another CTV story that has to do with me also calling out this creator. But we need more private investment. We need to show that Canada is open for investment. And what does a Premier EB continue to do? He continues to put out videos like this where he's asked, will you support the pipelines? Have you liked the video yet? It helps get these videos in front of more people. We're trying to grow the channel. Don't forget to sign up for Wealthsimple. Link is down below. You get $25. I get $25. We're taking out the big banks. Let's get back to it.
Today, Premier Danielle Smith in Alberta said she believes she's 5 weeks away from finding a proponent to build a pipeline from Alberta to BC's coast. If she's able to find a proponent and that proponent pays for the pipeline in its entirety, would you support that bitumen pipeline going through British Columbia to a port in Prince Rupert?
Simple question. If there is a private investor who's paying private money for a nation-building project, will you support it?
Well, Richard, I guess some of my frustration about this issue is that there is no proponent.
She's working on it. She said she's 5 weeks away.
There is actually no project here. I went through a list that reflects probably in excess of $50 billion of investment in Canada and in our country, where there are proponents, where they are well through or on the verge of being complete through environmental assessment processes, where support from the federal government will benefit not just British Columbia, but also Alberta and the Yukon. And I think that's where our attention should be, on the shovel-ready projects that are ready to go.
Next, we'll head to the phone lines.
Yeah, okay. So basically, according to him, there's no proponent from Danielle Smith, but this magical list worth billions and billions of dollars has so many proponents ready to go.
With Katie DeRosa from CBC.
You didn't answer Richard's question about whether you support a privately funded or entirely privately funded pipeline. Can you clarify your position on that?
Yeah, I did. I won't speculate. There is no project. There is no proponent. And as a premier of a province with literally almost $50 billion of projects with proponents that are ready to go, that are in approvals processes, that will benefit Alberta, the Yukon, and all Canadians, I strongly encourage the federal government to pay attention to those projects and help us deliver those projects that are ready to go.
What an absolute dweeb. And guess what? His province is currently under fire right now for overhiring in the public sector because their public sector is outpacing private growth by a large amount. And that's something I've been worried about for a long time. And that's why whenever I talk about the amount of GDP that is just public sector spending mixed with our reliance on real estate is how Canada has been building for the last 10, 20 years. And that is not sustainable. And what happens? We end up with job reports like this. And if you take a look, the top line is cut off there, but it's healthcare and social assistance, public administration, education services. Oh, look, small growth in finance and insurance. But the fact is, we're losing in all of these bottom half of industries while we're gaining in public and government jobs. And this was from Marty up north. And he said, we're shifting to an economy based on people who don't produce anything. 2 out of every 5 quote unquote workers in this country are employed by the government. It's actually slightly higher than that when you include all of the people who rely on the government for income. And he's saying of workers, because it's categorized differently. And obviously, when you combine everything together, that's a large number of people who are fully reliant on the government for their income. And that is not net productive to an economy. And we keep seeing, all of these politicians want to announce these new industries we're going to take on. What's the one that they've been really trying to beat down Canadians' throats? They've been talking about spending tens of billions of dollars on it. It's the EV market. Well, let's get a quick little update. He studies China's economy, and this is an update on what's going on with their EV market. And keep in mind, they produce for less than us. We're going to get all into it, but this is what Canada wants us to try and compete with.
China's automobile industry is imploding, driving them to dump billions worth of vehicles with price cuts up to 34%. Zero Hedge calls it a nuclear price war that could wipe out car makers around the world, especially in Europe. The news comes from the Wall Street Journal, with ground zero being Chinese electric vehicle makers that use billions of cheap government handouts to comically overbuild.
Government subsidized Chinese EV manufacturing is what we want to take on as Canada.
To give a sense, at one point there were 500 car makers in China for EVs alone. Roughly 400 have already failed, leaving millions of abandoned EVs littering the Chinese countryside. Bloomberg calls them EV graveyards. According to the Journal, out of the remaining 100-odd Chinese EV companies, just 2 are actually making money: BYD, Li Auto, and of course Tesla. The other 98 are burning billions of cash to stay afloat.
No, but I thought the industry was growing. Isn't the industry it's the fastest growing according to the Liberal politicians, and Canada's going to be making so much money from it?
The oversupply is driving even the healthy companies to slash prices. So BYD, which is the biggest car maker in China and number 6 worldwide behind Chrysler, just slashed prices by 34%. Their entry-level Seagull EV now goes for $10,000.
And by the way, the reason I'm being so specific on the information that's coming out of the government that seems to conflict with reality is because the story I'm about to get into with conflicting with reality comes from government, but it's also coming from a creator who you guys will know, and I think probably trust his opinion on these things, but he's not right.
So this may actually dramatically understate the cuts. Apparently, Chinese car makers sell so-called zero-mileage used cars, meaning the car is new, it's never been driven, but they pretend it is used so they can slash the price to get rid of it. The chairman of Great Wall Motor, also one of China's biggest, said the industry is going through a, quote, Evergrande moment.
For those who don't know, Evergrande was a major real estate developer in China. Basically, once the purchasing dried up, they had just controlled so much of the real estate market. It was a bit of a domino that could have been massive to the Chinese economy if the government hadn't stepped in. It was a whole thing, and it was like a scary thing that people thought was going to have a giant global impact. So them saying that this is having an Evergrande effect to the car manufacturing impact, and maybe it's something Canada doesn't want to double down on.
Referring to a massive Chinese property Ponzi scheme. In other words, China's Lehman moment. The spark is a bevy of Chinese cities ending EV subsidies because China's governments are running out of money. This matters because since Donald Trump's trade war, China has dumped roughly $1 trillion in stimulus to maintain the illusion that everything is fine.
Yeah, and that's another thing that I wanted to cover from him talking about here, because it's important to note China is not doing necessarily as well as everybody thought. So this trade war was a big deal, especially when Canada thought they were going to take on the U.S.
And to keep paying the millions of workers who otherwise might riot. Now, these have puffed up the economic data. So China reported 6.4% growth in retail sales in the first month of tariffs. But it turns out, like so much in China, the government bought the data. Now, China doesn't export any cars to the U.S. They're not allowed to by safety regulations. So instead, the dumping is going everywhere else. Reuters recently ran an article about a river of BYD cargo ships dumping cars into Brazil, which is wiping out the domestic car industry. Europe just slapped tariffs up to 38% on.
Yeah, think about that. If Brazil is not even able to produce cars for a cheaper, more competitive price than China is, that's dumping them into their country, how would Canada ever do it?
Chinese EVs to protect their producers, driving Trump-hating EU President von der Leyen to admit, quote, Donald is right on China dumping. She probably needed a stiff one after that. So what's next, brought to you by Unchained.com, China spent decades dumping trillions of cheap money into exporters. This drove systemic overcapacity not just in cars, but in everything from property development, the ghost cities, to consumer goods, to steel, windmills, and solar. Foreign companies cannot compete with free money, and with Trump's trade war now sending thousands of Chinese companies to the bailout line, China is also running out of money.
Okay, so China's running out of money. We've seen the government has been misquoting stats. We've seen the government is trying to direct us into the wrong thing. They're behind on this data. They are completely about to take us off a cliff. And it's very important to call things out. We are allowed to call things out in reality. And that's why when we see articles titled like this and how they say, basically, complaints against South Asians are skyrocketing in Canada, the report says. And one of the funny things that I want to get into in this report, first of all, it's saying, oh, statistically, the complaints are up, blah, blah, blah. And they talk about the complaints and they sort of disprove themselves in their own article, which is very funny. Rai said there are seemingly several factors affecting the issue, one of them being Canadians seemingly conflating, concerns around housing crisis, a lack of job opportunities, and other economic anxieties as being the fault of immigration policy. Well, being as almost, not quite, but almost every mainstream economist feels safe enough now to talk about how immigration is directly impacting these things, I don't think we're conflating anything. I think we are drawing conclusions from economic data, and it's being proven, and they even say it. And they're sort of linking what they perceive as a weakness in the Canadian economy to an influx in immigration. I wonder why that is. So that's the first piece for a lot of Canadians. And then they say, oh, it's just so easy to call them out because they look different than us. And that's what they say in this article here. But then they go and disprove their own self in the article by saying Prime Minister Carney has promised a cap on immigration numbers in part to ease the pressure on the housing sector. So if Mark Carney is doing this and he's saying it's true, how are we conflating anything? We're not. We are taking economic data. We are taking consumer trends. We are taking growth numbers, and we are building a picture of what's happening in our economy. And this is why we need to hold people like Clyde do something accountable. I was really disappointed to see this tweet, and I'm sure you guys know him. I'm going to give him a bit of a grace here because I think he's been on the back foot for a few things, which we'll get into, but he's objectively rewriting history, and we are going to immediately disprove it. He says, my coming appearance at this weekend's event has triggered Canada's finest inbred. So now if you disagree with Clyde, you're an inbred. He says, hint, Canada has never been or never will be a white-only country. Let's see if we can back that up, Clyde. Our British roots have a longer, friendly history with India than Canada has existed as a nation. Well, speaking of rewriting history, Clyde, I think we should probably check in with the Indians and ask them their thoughts on the British colonization of India and consider if that's friendly history, because something tells me from all of the discourse that I've seen in the history of ever, I don't think they were happy with that relationship. So couple rewriting of history there. Current immigration policies from the government of Canada should make you angry with the government of Canada. True, I think he's right there. But then he says, not Indian people as a whole. Okay, first of all, yes, we do not need to paint every single person. However, we can clearly see, and just like things I've talked about in other videos, they are the ones who are the most prolific at breaking the rules and bending the law and doing all of these things to get into Canada and then undercut markets and all of that stuff. So first of all, whenever somebody is posting like this and they want you to act in a binary, oh no, you blame the government, that's it, don't blame them. We can blame both. Yes, the government has made policies where it is too easy and it has absolutely encouraged mass immigration. But just like we covered in yesterday's video, we have Indian companies talking about how they are breaking the rules and at the very least bending the law by getting people approved for these refugee cases that they don't technically apply for. So yes, who's to blame? These people are committing false claims, allegedly, and then the government is approving them. So you can blame both. But he also said Canada has never been a white country. Well, let's read into the statistics a little bit. In 1970, Canada's population was approximately 21.5 million, with about 96% being of European descent. often referred to as white in demographic context. This estimate comes from historical census data and is noting prior to the 1970s, Canada's population was overwhelmingly European due to immigration policies favoring European settlers. And this is where the rewriting of history comes in. Over almost all of Canada's history, up until 1976, when Pierre Trudeau changed it, it was European immigration first. And yes, I am not saying that Indian people were not in Canada during that time. I'm not saying that there weren't Africans. I'm not saying that there weren't people from other countries in Canada at that time. But the fact is, we were close to 100% European at this time. And Kirk Lubomov shared this photo, and this photo is from the 1980s, okay? There's a group of white people. If you go to any event now, obviously it looks different. So here's the thing. I'm not mad at Clyde because allegedly he's getting attacked because his wife is not white. So if he feels like he's being defensive, he wants to defend his wife in that situation, absolutely, I get it. The fact is, he's choosing to do it by rewriting history, and that's not what you're supposed to do. If he wants to make the argument that Canada has changed, we've seen major demographic shifts since that time, absolutely, that's an argument you can totally make, and if you want to say that's the future of Canada and that's what you want to argue on behalf of, you can do that all day. We're not going to rewrite Canada's history and pretend like we've had millions and millions of Indians in Canada over the history of Canada. Basically, most of the demographic shift started in 1997 to 2000, and then things started to shift wildly. Sure, demographics have absolutely changed, and I will give you that. And it's not like Clyde's wrong about everything, and all of a sudden you have to not like him anymore. But when people do say things like this that are incorrect, we are allowed to call them out. And again, you guys watching this, you're not crazy for acknowledging reality. So when CTV puts out these articles that's like, wait, we're beating inflation, and you know, oh, you're only hating them because of this. It's just not true when the mainstream media puts out stuff like that. But that's why I also want to hold other people like Clyde Do Something accountable, because he's a voice who people in Canada rely on. And again, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. He's just wrong on this specific topic. Anyways, if you made it this far in the video, you absolutely rock. Don't forget to like and subscribe. We're trying to get these videos in front of more people. Don't forget to sign up for Wealthsimple. Link is down below. You get $25. I get $25. We're taking on the big banks. Now's the time to protect your finances and have a great rest of your day.